How's everybody doing?
Great.
Good. It's good to have you here. So I'm looking forward to today's conversation. My name is Dorsey, and I'm here in Boston. Glad to welcome so many folks from around the country. Always good to be with my family from Boston as well. I serve as the Chief Impact Officer at the Eastern Bank Foundation. My family as well, yes. I serve as the Chief Impact Officer at the Eastern Bank Foundation, and you heard from our president last night. But I'm really here because I've had a long and valued relationship with the Boston Ujima project. So I'm also an entrepreneur in Boston's Nubian Square, the co-founder of Jazz Urbane Cafe, which is coming to the bowling building in Nubian Square. And we would not be doing this without the Boston Ujima project and its membership. They've also been great supporters of work that I'm doing with the Benjamin Franklin Cummings Institute of Technology, which is also coming to Nubian Square in 2025. And so really glad to be here. We're going to be having a conversation today about driving social impact by elevating community voice. But I want us to think more specifically than just social impact, but think more intently about the kind of social impact we're driving. And so I'm going to posit to you that what we're talking about is the creation of economic self-determination by raising community voice. And so my compatriots here who are going to be offering me a whole lot of guidance, and I hope laying out a roadmap for how I should be playing a number of roles in the community, as well as all of us. We're going to dive into this conversation to really figure out and talk about how we harness the power of community for the economic justice that we desire. And so I am here today with Mia Johnson. I'm here with Leena, Mathew, and Seona Bay. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, and in doing so, tell us who you are, tell us what your connection to Ujima is, and what that connection says about your belief in community power as a catalyst for economic change and justice. And we will first go to Mia Johnson.
Well, good afternoon. I'm glad some of you guys got well close, and if you need space, I'm glad you took it. I am here as a representative of a couple different things. So I'm with the North American Indian Center of Boston, and I served as the vice president on the board for many years. I stepped back a year ago to take on a 2-year project of writing and researching transformative organizing, grassroots organizing Indigenous sovereignty across the U.S. territories with different tribal nations in conversations. So that's part of what I've been focusing on and developing a report out of that. And I was able to bring back a really beautiful story and share with folks in Ujima from Deming, New Mexico, about the connection of my tribe, which is the Mescalero Apaches, and the Buffalo Soldiers, which were literally on the last skirmish happened in the territory of my ancestors. And it was just really powerful and beautiful. So that story of Ujima began for me in the back porch of Aaron Tanaka's house, who's a good friend of mine. We also co-founded a catering company called Olio. And he began talking about this idea of economics and shifting economics. And then met, and then as a founding member at the kickoff, and continued to be a part of this and have done organizing in Boston, predominantly with Black communities in Boston and Indigenous communities in Boston, as well as nationally. That led to joining the Community Standards Committee and helping to create and co-found that committee's 36-point business kind of requests of business of best practices to show up in our communities and what we want from our communities by talking with and interviewing the 36 different sectors that those questions all represent. So that's how I'm here today, and I'm really happy to be a part of this conversation.
Never mind. Thank you, though. Hi, everyone. I'm Leena, Mathew. I'm the Director of Policy and Campaigns at Matahari Women Worker Center. I'm relatively new to the role, so very excited to be here with all of you in this role. Matahari organizes domestic workers and restaurant workers, specifically women, immigrant women in femme-dominated industries like domestic work and restaurant work. So we're really excited to be here and part of this conversation. We've had the privilege of building so many better relationships with businesses and new models of how to do business over the last several years. So we're just really excited to be part of this relationship with Ujima. I frequently say that we have like an organizationship with Ujima. We're just nursing a massive crush and love to be part of spaces like this and discussions like this to bring ourselves just in closer relationship. So thank you.
Thanks, Leena. I'm Seona Bay. I'm a resident of Boston in a particular neighborhood called Dorchester. Ujima came at a time where just personally I became way more open to understanding my place in the world, in particular Boston, and just started attending meetings. So I am currently a Ujima member. I become or renew my membership every year. I also recently, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago when we were raising the $5 million Ujima loan fund, decided to become an investor myself. So very happy about that. And then I also sit on we're all kind of volunteers, right? But we're doing this for us. I've been sitting on the Anchor Institution Strategy team member meeting. We meet once a month, try to brainstorm and activate local anchors like hospitals and higher education. Try to figure that out. In terms of what I'd love to see is the catalyst to engage, I mean, just more of us, more of we, and I don't mean to say this in a negative way, it's just the everyday work, the showing up that is kind of hard 3, 4, 5, 6 years down the line. So I don't have an answer. It's just more, I'm enthused about Ujima and the ecosystem and each of the initiatives that we've been trying to push over the years. It's pretty audacious. And then I put a period on that. What, we raised $5 million? Okay. Wow. And so I think with everything, it becomes this dream come to reality. And I love it. I love it.
Wonderful, thank you. So I want folks to start to pay attention to a couple of threads that are going to pull through this conversation, because I think you heard even in the introductions, there are threads about the many roles that can be played in community to advance our shared objectives around change. Yeah. The many, many roles. And so we're going to explore some of those things. There's also going to be, I think, an emerging theme about cooperation and accountability in the relationships that we have with one another. So I just ask you to pay attention to that. Mia, I want to turn to you first and maybe have you expound on your introduction and make very clear for everybody in the room why community power is essential to economic self-determination.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and so I knew this was coming, so I didn't explain too much about what I do at Ujima as a volunteer. And I also think it's the equity of shared time, right? If you place value on your time and you talk about what is time, what do you invest in, where do you put your money? This is one of the ways in which I feel like I'm making sure that this is everlasting in our community. The Community Standards Committee's work is now to evaluate businesses that have been recommended by our pool of community members, right, including Jazz Urbane, which came through, was one of the first to come in and be like, hey, do we hit any of these standards? And we want to be considered as part of a good business, and get that kind of stamp and also support with Ujima. And if we end up looking for investment, we have the ability to, because we have that stamp and community approval, and we're also part of this network of other businesses that are reaching for that goal of being the best possible business. And, if we end up needing support and funding, this is an outside system that's not directly related to a bank that has denied many of our communities and community businesses access, right? Not even funding, just access to the funding. So it plays an important role because like I said, we have 36 different questions that each of these businesses are held accountable to. And 10 of those questions, we decided at some point that maybe these are aspirational questions. We recognize that we're not all going to be there. But the reality is that each of these 36 points represents an industry, and each of these standards represents workers and people and residents that do this labor and do this work and have a right to be held and have a seat at the table. So one of the things I like to think about when I'm in the Good Standards Committee is my responsibility is not just to this business that's in front of us, but to the hundreds of people and workers and residents that are represented in these fields of industry that are at this table that we're saying as a community, our expectation is that we're meeting and reaching for these goals. Whether there's room for in our current economy under capitalism or not, whether there's room for that given the way things are, we are constantly drawing and reaching and reforming how it could be and teaching each other ways and practices that could make the industry better, at minimum for our businesses that serve our community. So when people walk into Jazz Urbane, they know that the people who work there are also being held to an accountability that says, hey, we're going to review this and check in a year after opening, after we did this, to see how are your workers doing? And there is a separate conversation with them. How are the folks working here experiencing their work? And it's not a check to be like you're wrong or you're right. It's a check to be like, where are the gaps? How do we have that conversation? What support does this business need to cover the gaps? Or what are they doing that is really phenomenal that we need to share with other businesses about how they broach that gap? The ingenuity that came out of the workers and residents to bring that gap forward, right? Because that's where the ideas come when you create a space that cultivates the ability for us to think creatively and be welcome to show up as we are fully. And I think that's what, the practice of Ujima, the practice of these 36 initial standards does in bringing and holding accountable not just the businesses and not just getting into an investment fund, but the residents who make decisions about, hey, I love how this is working. Did you see how it worked over here? They're reporting XYZ really well. And this is where I'm seeing it go over here. That's really unique to your experience of a fund, right? To most funds, they're not like, oh, well, we care about it. No, we care about it. We want it to improve. And we understand that that's not going to happen just from our initial, 6 years ago, 7 years ago. Can't remember how many years ago it's been. A long time. I get them confused because I was doing a lot of stuff with the co-ops at that time when I got brought in. So, so I think that's the answer is, making sure people are represented at the table and represented as industry and recognizing that is an ongoing conversation for all of Ujima, and that it doesn't mean that it's stagnant. It's a living, breathing entity that understands that we have 10 points that were aspirational even when we created it. Yeah. And we still want those aspirational things to become things that are just a part of our business.
Thank you, Mia. And so even in that example, so first of all, there's a myth that I think you're helping us to dispel, that community is an object of the economy, and that the economy simply exerts its force on community and then community has to respond. What you just made the case for is that community can be social engineers in the process to determine what the economy looks like. And I will say from the Jazz Urbane standpoint, with the community standards, we got very lucky. We had not developed our business plan very much at that point. And so to be able to create something that is built around those standards, I think gives us a very particular advantage and creates a distinct accountability. And so, Seona, let's turn to you because I think Mia helped us establish the essential nature of community power in this. But I would say our civic imagination for agency is often limited. And so we know how to get into the public square and raise our voices. There are actions that we can take. In a separate conversation, we can talk about why I still think our imagination for public agency is limited. But I think even more so in a space where we are thinking about the roles that we have to play to determine the direction of markets, that imagination is even more limited. So I'm wondering if you can help us understand more concretely what are some of the roles that we play in the very unique spaces that intersect between the market and the public square where we can be full agents.
Yeah, I think if I'm understanding a little bit of what you're asking me to respond to, I think we need to identify and recognize that we have power. And, I think in a very limiting way, we say, go and vote for your, vote your, for your, in the city or state or federal elections. But I think if we bring this to the hyper-local level, like I'm experiencing it with Ujima, it's bring your voice to Urbane. I read the business plan. I read the equity, I forget what it's called, the statement or contract. And, I ask questions. I'm not a business person, but, and what I could understand, or what I kind of was engaged with enough, did it feel right? And can I exercise my vote, to engage in the actual equity deal? Hi, Nia. So I think, I think there's a place. I think we are, in some way, we are all anesthetized. We're a little bit sleepy behind the wheel, and we don't recognize that we have the wheel. We can steer. I think we know it in our own personal lives, within our family and our neighbors, my street even has like a neighborhood association, the remnants of one. So we talk about it, but then I think somehow, so I think to continue to kind of push forward a story, publicize it in all aspects, my life, in our lives, to, recognize that there's a place for all of us and each of us, and actually we need each of us, and we not only need to participate, but we need to drive. I think in Ujima, I've learned a lot. I've learned a ton, actually, sitting at the feet of Nia and so many of our, organizers and members. And what I found is just persist, like just be with, stay, be constant, even as little time, once a month. Or every week, or even more so, engage in brainstorming and recognize that actually your voice is not some, and power is not some like commodity. It's actually, it's just the reality. We just maybe need to kind of recognize it more and share the stories more as we do. So I love Ujima because we're so hyper-local, and that's very tangible to me. Like, literally, I can't wait to go down, to Nubians.
We can't wait to have you.
Yeah, and, I was bummed to not be part of Nia, Grace by Nia event last night, because that's also, part of our family. But, yeah, so I think that is the primary thing, and it looks different, and everyone's expression, but I'm not giving up talking to my neighbors, and listening to what they're also engaged in as well. So
I love that. There are a couple of things that you said that I want to pull out for the audience. One, I think you suggested that there's an inverse relationship between being hyper-local and how much power you have. The more local you get, the more the power grows.
yes,
So remember that.
in reality,
In reality, yeah.
we just, yeah.
So remember that. And I think while we're oftentimes trying to wrestle with meta problems that are hugely structural and a number of things, sometimes we can free ourselves up just to kind of realize we can walk out of the door and talk to the first person we see.
Yep.
about our perspective on the world, about what our common cause is, and that there's a great deal of power in that. You also said that in reviewing Jazz Urbane's business model, the work that Ujima was doing, you read it, you dug in, it felt right to you, it didn't feel right to you. I think it's important in a place, especially like Boston, where credential inflation is off the chain, to realize not everybody has to be an economist, not everybody has to be a financial planner to assess, is this the right thing for me and my community?
Yeah.
Do I think this is going to deliver the value that I and we intend?
Yes.
All that takes is your lived experience. That's nothing about a credential. So let's turn to you now, Leena. So we've talked about why community is powerful. We've talked a little bit about the roles and how you amplify that power. Let's talk about accountability, because there are many relationships in this, but there's a relationship maybe that we concentrate on between community and those entrepreneurs and investors, particularly those of color, whom we want to support in their enterprises. I will say that I've heard many entrepreneurs say that my accountability to the community is just to be successful. I need to be around. I will say I personally don't believe that. If you put a bet on me, I got a bet on you. And so there's a deeper and more mutual relationship that we need to have with one another. You do a lot of work around cooperative relationships. Help us understand what the accountability should be.
Yeah, and thinking about this question, I was thinking a lot about like the early days of Matahari's co-directorship model. So we use something called a worker-directed nonprofit model, which draws a lot of inspiration from cooperatives about like how to govern an organization together. And one of the first things they taught us was, like when we were doing a lot of our training around this, was that support and accountability are flip sides of the same coin. And what they meant by that is that often support is the interventions that happen early, and accountability is the interventions that happen later on. And it really reminds me of what you were talking about, Seona, around like reviewing the business
Say that one
model.
more time.
Yeah. Support is the interventions that happen early on, and accountability are the interventions that happen later on. Yep. So like in, reviewing the business plan and like reading the contracts and kind of like exposing yourself to a world maybe that you're not super familiar with as like a non-business owner. Yeah. You are offering a lot of early on support, right? Before there is like a need for accountability, you're kind of voicing the concerns so early on that you're influencing the design, you're influencing like how it's birthed into the world. So I really think that there's a lot of value in having that sustained relationship for such a long time, and like building a relationship that's not just about being adversaries in a way. I think like labor organizing historically has had very like a real adversarial relationship to business, right? For like good reason a lot of the time. But I think that we're in kind of a new moment where different types of communities are in ownership of are stewards of resources. We're in a new moment where people have like more complex relationships to each other. They're also owners of businesses as well as workers in different arenas of their lives. So I think the direction I'm taking from my community is we want to engage in the complexity of having both, of having really good stewards of resources, as well as being really empowered workers and empowered like laborers in other pieces of our lives. So I think like the new moment we are in labor organizing and in business is giving us some opportunity to be real creative about what those like spaces really look like.
Wonderful, thank you.
Nice.
As a follow-up to kind of this mutual accountability and mutual benefit relationship, I'm wondering if anybody can talk to the role that you see community playing in indemnifying the success of community ventures. How can we make sure that the things that community wants to bet on are successful, that they are relatively de-risked, or the risk is shared, or that the risk is even put into perspective? Because I think we name, and we heard this last night at Grace by Idea, a lot of things as being risky that in fact aren't. A lot of that is the superimposing of judgment about who can win, who cannot, who's good at leading and who's not. But what's the role that the community can play in making sure that there's success for investors and entrepreneurs of color?
Yeah, please.
I think. Thank you. I love this. I love this. I think that's a good example, actually, of the brilliance of what your question is answering, right? Because we each hold different ways and different perspectives into this. And to go back to something I was saying, one of the things I think is really important is the design of the standards and design of Ujima is always to circle back. So if we say that we're in a circular economy, we're in a circular transfer of abundance, that means we're always coming back and looking back at, like, where are we going? Where is the point that we need to shift, and understanding that every voice that shows up may have the way in to create that other thing, right? So a good example is during, I came out of doing restaurant organizing, so I don't know Matahari. But so some of the work I did in that, there are a lot of chefs. So when the pandemic hit and a lot of the restaurants were hit and shut, a lot of like workers and chefs and owners that I knew, we were in conversation about what can they do, how can they support each other in staying open, in providing some kind of work, in what's the transition needed. And some of those that had already been what we consider like the high roads had already been making decisions about using some of the best practices that are drawn into the Ujima good standards, right, were some of the first to quickly move into not only supporting themselves, but in supporting other businesses and other workers in being like, this is how we're going to do it. This is the transition. These are the things. How do we collectivize getting the resources to like establish the business so there can be pickups, so there can be this, so we can make sure we have workers working and they're safe. They can get here and get back safely, that they're safe while they're here. All of those things were happening in a conversation with owners, chefs, and workers at the table to figure out, well, what piece is missing? Like, is it safe for you to travel to work? Is it? And I think that's the kind of example that when we think about being in community in Ujima, it is hyper-local, but it doesn't have to stay that way, right? And I'm not saying that Ujima is expanding. Let me just be clear. But I am saying that our context of thinking about what we can do, as I said before, what I bet on with my energy is what I'm betting on in my circulation. How I hold accountability to that is what Ujima is doing when we say, let's look back to go forward. So if I'm saying I'm betting on Jazz Urbane to be the thing the thing that people want, in 2 years, people come back and they're like talking about, yeah, I like being in Jazz Urbane because it is the thing that we want. And now we want more of it. So where's the space to create more, right? How do we bet on those folks who come up and say, I don't have any business practicum. I didn't go to business school, I didn't have access to that. But I do have a sense of hustle. I do have a sense of vision. I do have a sense of skill, right? How do we put those in partnerships? And so a lot of things that we talk about when we have businesses come through or solo entrepreneurs come through is we look at it and say, what kind of support can Ujima hold? Right? At the beginning, what support does it look like to help hold that business through to this next phase, right? What do we need to have? Is there new things that come in that we need to address that we hadn't thought of before? Because it's a new type of business that's in front of us that needs a new type of support. And how do we bring that? And where's our resources within our network of our ecology of Ujima? And to me, that's a really different way of looking at what does it mean to not only be a space of community, but a fund that says part of our fund is that early investment of energy. That's part of our circulation.
Thank you.
I was going to say just maybe two things, and then just quickly, in our anchor work, some of our personal relationships to the anchor institutions were very limited. So we reached where we had existing relationships for many of the committee or the team members. It was our faith groups or faith institutions. So we were reaching out to those communities to try to bring them into, the Ujima frame of mind and support with procurement. And one of the things that I consistently came across was a bit of resistance. And so the thing that I would pull out of my pocket were those 36 standards. And I'd say, read about the standards. If anything, get to know what we as a collective community we're saying is good for us in terms of businesses. So then put your procurement dollars to the closest possible business that, looks like this. Like, inch your way toward that. Not sure it always, resonated, but anyway, I always pulled that out. I was like, here. So two things I wanted to say is I hate to put it this way, but I think we need skin in the game to make an impact and bring it back, right? So if I have skin in the game, however that is, my time, my energy, my psychic ability, my, proclamation and, evangelizing Ujima and solidarity economy, unabashedly Black-centered, Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan, right?
That's right.
So I think, we have to start in solidarity there. I think definitely there's so many intersections and we will all benefit. But having some skin in the game, even if it's not, something you might conventionally, is going to draw impact. It's going to, maybe draw you even more, but it's going to draw others too. So I think, how do I understand community impact? Put some skin in the game, however you can. I had a second thought, but then I can't remember now. So anyway.
That's all right. We will come back to it. So what I love about Ujima is that they've lowered the barriers to putting skin in the game. If you have $50, if you got 5 minutes, $25, you can put skin in the game and be directly involved. What I love about the community standards and what you said, Mia, is that now we've expanded the framework on success. Success isn't just about what happens at the bottom line and the profit margin. It really is about those 36 points about what holistic enterprise looks like and the value that accrues to community by many measures, the health of the community measured in many ways. So I am about to make a cultural reference that is going to tell my age, but I want to get you involved in the conversation. So I'm about to Phil Donahue this thing. Who knows? See, there are a few people who looked at me with blank stares. They were like, who's this Phil Donahue that you speak
Oprah?
of? But who has questions or thoughts that they'd like to share? And tell us who you are.
John Jenkins. I'm with a group called We Are the Ones out of Houston, Texas. We are a cooperative incubator. And my question is around engagement in education. Like, in practice, what does it look like for engagement in education for people to develop a sustained bandwidth and capacity to contribute to this work?
Wonderful. Whomever wants to take the question. And by the way, I watched Phil Donahue as a kid.
I'll just say one aspect is I found that we collectively, when we meet on Wednesdays for our Education Wednesdays, and then also once a month for co-direct participation in co-directing the Ujima strategy, number one, I don't feel judged for what I do know or don't know. Absolutely love that. So, and I'll leave it to others.
Yeah, I'd just say, like, I have to make an organizer pitch for removing some of the accessibility barriers, like interpretation and childcare and making it accessible transportation-wise, which I'm sure everyone knows, but also it definitely has, I've seen it have like a massive impact on how much my membership and the workers I interact with can get in there,
Wow.
Wonderful. Yes. And Mia, if you want to answer, I'll run the mic back to you.
They got them all.
All right.
Thank you, everyone. I work at a small nonprofit organization, and we have been trying to develop a democratic participatory voting system, starting with just us, right? Just the collective. And we immediately ran into two questions. One is, infrastructure is expensive. And how do we scale to ensure that the votes are, the voting processes are truly just and equitable, when there's an argument to be made that that work should be paid for.
All right.
This is from my member hat. I think that the premise of Ujima is sweat labor. There's a level of like in if you're building a co-op or a community land trust and you're doing community work, it's recognizing that sweat labor is part of that, right? And there can be an argument under capitalism that that's not equitable, and I hear that. And I also understand that in order for us to put in what we want out of the world, you have to give your energy to it. You have to put in your time for it to exist, and it has to be a commitment, right? It can't just be like when it feels good, it's good times. Because if you're in something that's in a circular ecology, there's not always good times, you know? And if anybody does the kind of, collective responsibility work, it's not always fun, you know? And you're gonna have to deal with conflict and tension. And so that when you put, I think if you are fortunate enough to have economy of scale in paper dollars or that kind of thing, great, but most of us don't. So we're like, what does it actually mean? Well, then my rights as someone holding votes accountable, right? The system that says, okay, well, are we doing a consensus-based system? Are we like, what system are we holding this vote accountable to? And then you hold it there, right? Even if someone is like maybe one of the perceived leaders of the group is like, oh, I'm against that, but the votes say this, then you hold it to that line. Because that's what everyone in that system, that ecology system, agreed to from the start. And then you have a conversation back and forth. That's when you get deep, and it creates an opportunity for innovation to happen. In those points of tension, walking into, I would say, I do a lot of restorative healing work as well in another part of my life, and privately. And so a lot of walking into the pain, right, and understanding walking through that doorway or that tension allows for that transformation to happen and sustain over time. I also say if you only make a 2-year vision, you're going to be really limited, right? You need a 15, 20-year vision. What is this? Where is it? And where does it sit within the ecology of everyone else that's around you in that network that supports what you're doing? So then also you can lean into, in points of tension, other parts of your ecology system, right? And they can help to hold you while you move through something, or in celebration as these things come to pass, right?
I'll maybe just mention too, I don't mean to harp on this idea of how can we educate the community and kind of impart our wisdom so that they can assume the education that we're trying to impart on them. I think a collective education, there's wisdom in practice, in tradition, and whatever you want to call it, in the day-to-day, mundane kind of process of things. And if you can somehow, continue to, I guess, promote that we are individually empowered in our group, then we will begin kind of self-educating, if you will, right? And also the idea of, I think with Ujima, we did kind of have some challenges, unexpected challenges by which, the purely one vote, one member, one vote, maybe it didn't quite turn out the way it was challenging. And so I believe a couple of years later, we did evolve some of that with community, maybe not consensus, but with our discussion. This is our co-direct kind of, with kind of the leader organizers. And so we did evolve that. I forget how long ago, maybe 3 years ago.
Right before the pandemic.
And so it's not one vote, one member, one vote. It's not for everything, but in specific things, it's a representational vote. And so we kind of moved to that model. Did I say that right? It's a little bit more representational. But yeah, so evolution, if you want to call it innovation, I'm sure it's been around in the world. But it's not, it's not a steadfast thing in stone that says democratic engagement looks like one way. I still feel like there's a voice, and I'm not, getting the wool pulled over my eyes or anything like that. So I don't know if that helps.
And so I think the steadfastness is necessary, not only because we need the consistent level of effort, but
Yeah.
there has to be continuity in the innovation as well. You have to keep inventing the thing. Other questions, thoughts? Deetra, and we'll come to you next.
I think these two things go together, but I'm not sure. I was trying to imagine hyperlocal
Yeah.
means place. Yes? Okay.
Ujima context is place-based.
Okay.
For now.
That was a wink of an eye if you missed that. Okay, that was helpful because as we're trying to build in Rhode Island and Providence, we're not place-based because we're women of color, non-binary folks of color, and we come from across the state. But this idea, how do we work in relationship to hyperlocal, is something that we've tried to really grapple with. We have been also trying to grapple with what are the institutions we build with? Who are they? What are they bringing to the table? And we have a basic standard for ourselves. Is there values alignment? Hopefully they're run by women or non-binary folks. But that's as far as we've really gotten, so I would love to even understand the standards, because I feel like even in our practice as a member-based organization, we're trying to hold something.
Yeah.
And as we're on a journey of trying to build, what does it mean? You know, there's lots of folks that we do a lot of hustling around trying to find, just purchasing food because we have food and childcare, and trying to figure out how to do all those things at the same time. But in the developing of a set of standards, how do you think about, do you have that for many other things within the organization, or is it, could you talk a little bit about that?
I think the standards, the 36 are very specific. We, the community, came around an actual assembly and we did paper all over the room, and we went and voted for what standards were really important to us individually and then collectively for our community. And so I think that's how those. But I think the ideas of those can somewhat be extrapolated out, but I don't know.
So the past before the vote happened, we talked with different industries. So I said each standard represents at least one different industry, and there's a couple overlaps, right? And like there's like the retail and restaurant worker overlap in a couple of the standards because that's how some of the knowledge. So it was like the best thinking, the best possible practice from each area of industry and area of work that made sense. So I think that there are two things to think about in. Again, I said hyper-local for the context of Ujima is within a, geography, right? Yeah. Within the project that you're doing, it's within it's an idea, right? It's an idea of a way of practice of being. So then it's like, where does that look like, and what does it look like in those practices, right? And a way of asking a question. With developing a standard, we started asking the question, what were the things either that we were struggling or fighting for within a standard? So, for example, with restaurant workers, it's the sub-minimum wage, right? This like why in the New Deal were restaurant workers and farmers left out, right? And where their wages are still being represented today in that being left out, right? So what is there any work being done around that, right? And there is. So that's where some of that was like, where's the struggle and fight with that within that industry? Who's holding those concepts and like pushing forward this innovation? Are we connected to any of that work? How do we then formulate that, right? So that's a way of looking at it and being like, what are the things that your group most holds, and how do you feel that you can hold all of them? And we didn't start out with we wanted 36. That's what we came down to. Like, we had a lot more. And then we were like, really, what are there any things that go together? And then we're going to propose it to the entire Ujima family and community and say, okay, here are the things that we've come out with all of this, like polling as a small group together. Does it make sense? And are these things that you want? Because this is what we're going to use as the thing that we hold ourselves accountable to.
And some of the standards are things like, environmental sustainability practices, accounting transparency what is it? Open bookkeeping practices. So
the wage gap between
Yeah.
the owner to the worker.
they're really ideal. They're doable in a solidarity economy, in a cooperative economy, I think, but they are sometimes stretches as well. But we like the aspiration because we want to go after that. And Ujima hyperlocal context, it's possible. We did it. We did it with the Ujima Fund, which is majority, not dollars, but majority stakeholders are community members with $25 investments. We did it, so.
We're going to take one last question from the audience for you guys.
Sorry, I'm sitting down. So I was just wondering if you could say more about the challenges with the one member, one vote, and the representational voting transition.
I know, I was going to say, I know enough about it. Hi. I don't know, should we shift the camera? No, I'm kidding. I see a person. I think just quickly, from how I understood it, it was factual based after a round of voting for, I forget exactly what the vote was for, and we didn't quite reach quorum. One vote, one member, one vote.
Was that Sarah?
It wasn't Sarah, it was a standard. What was the challenge when we moved from one member, one vote to the representative experiment? We're all addressing Nia, their executive director. So
We're like,
I came in here to look for somebody else, but. So I think you're talking about us moving to delegates. Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
That's what it was. Yeah.
So we did that because our very first vote is what we call our epic vote, which we opened in April 2019. And it's our epic vote because we were trying to ask 4 questions at once. The first question was, where should we put our money? Actually, maybe this was April 2018. I can't remember now. 2019, I think. First question was, where should we put our money? At that point, we had raised $1 million. And people were asking, where are you going to put the money? The idea being, hopefully not Bank of America or something like that, right?
Which institution?
Right. So which institution? That was the first question. So we figured enough people asked, people wanted to decide this.
Yeah.
Second question was then ratifying the list of businesses, 140 businesses.
Long.
Long, and so this is the crux of it. Third question was ratifying the standards, 36 standards.
That's right.
Fourth question was, can we have an additional channel for sourcing investments from investment partners? Because we anticipated pretty early on that not every possible investment opportunity was going to come from community members. And we're mostly thinking about real estate.
Yeah.
For example, if you're not in the industry, you don't know something's happening until you start to see stuff getting built. And then at that point, you're just reacting. So those were things we were thinking about. It took us 4 months to close out those first 3 questions, and we did not close out the 4th one. We could have pushed it a couple of weeks. We had maybe about 10, 11 more votes to go, and we decided to call it and to say, let's just say we failed this last one, because it's also important for us to be able to say we failed and to not pretend and to not create false situations where we were calling everything a success.
Yeah.
So one of the things we did was we learned asking people to review information for 140 business, that's silly. So we cannot legitimately say people were informed about 140 businesses and voted on it. So we said, that's too much information. So there was a learning about decision fatigue in terms of how many questions you ask at once, how much information you're providing at once. And we definitely said, we think there was too much information. So what we did was we then moved to a delegates process where we took our super voters, so to speak, and we said each super voter is not going to review more than 10 businesses each. So then we could more legitimately say the votes are well informed. So that was
And
it.
so it wasn't necessarily representational voting is not the right term at all, or concept. It's more of a delegate. So it's kind of a tiered, like, let the delegates become super informed and put forth something that would be more feasible for me to review. But I think it was a wonderful evolution because it relieved a bit of burden on the on the membership, on us, and it also created a platform by which we're like you don't need to know everything about everything, but we're also not going to water it down. Let's put skin in the game. Come show up, neighbor, come, and just keep persisting. Every opportunity to vote or engage or co-direct is an opportunity for me to kind of learn more, and then focus on the areas that I really like, that excite me as a member, and then continue on. But yeah, so I think technically there's still one member, one vote. So I said it incorrectly. It's definitely not a representational, kind of like the federal government election thing. Does that help? Okay. Helps that Neo was here too. So.
Thank you.
It did get murky. I was like, oh. So thank you.
Okay.
The fifth panelist. So we are nearing the end of our time together, and I want to thank you for being active participants in this conversation, just by way of accountability to you and representing the team at Jazz Urbane. I do want to say a thank you to Ujima because they first invested the love and the capital in us. We've successful raised, thank you.
Yes.
We have successfully raised about $2 million at this point. Yes. We've got about $1.5 million to go, but construction starts this month, and so Jazz Urbane is coming. I would love for you to help me thank Seona, Leena, and Mia for such a wonderful conversation. Enjoy the rest of your time, and we're around for additional questions. Thank you again.